It was another rainy morning at Marty's Diner, the kind of small-town cafe where the smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with chatter and the soft hum of old country music. Emily Parker, a 26-year-old waitress with tired eyes and a heart full of warmth, wiped down the counter for the third time that hour. The rain had slowed business and tips were scarce. Still, she smiled at everyone who walked in, because Emily believed that sometimes a smile was all a person needed to get through the day. Her co-workers teased her for it. "Em, you gotta stop smiling so much," said Jenna, balancing a tray. "This ain't Disney World." Emily just laughed softly. "Maybe not," she replied, "but a little kindness doesn't cost much." Just as the lunch rush ended, the bell above the door chimed. An old man stepped in, drenched from the rain. His clothes were worn, an old coat too thin for the weather, shoes that squeaked with every step. He had the kind of face that told stories, wrinkles like pages of a well-read book and eyes that seemed to hold both wisdom and sorrow. Emily greeted him cheerfully. "Good afternoon, sir. You look like you could use something warm." He gave a faint smile. "Just a small coffee, please. I don't have much cash on me today." His voice trembled slightly, and his hands shook as he reached into his pocket for a few crumpled coins. Without a moment's hesitation, Emily said gently, "Don't worry about it, sir. This one's on me." The old man looked up, startled. "You don't even know me." She smiled. "I don't need to. Coffee's meant to warm the soul, right? Consider it a refill for yours." He blinked, eyes glistening with emotion. "Thank you, young lady. You're very kind." As she poured the steaming coffee into a chipped white mug, she didn't notice the small tear that rolled down his cheek. He sipped slowly, watching her move around the diner, helping customers, laughing softly with coworkers, and slipping an extra cookie to a crying child. When he was done, he left quietly, but not before leaving a small note under his cup. Emily found it after clearing the table. It read, "Sometimes angels wear aprons. Thank you for reminding me that goodness still exists." She smiled warmly, folding the note into her apron pocket. To her, it was just another day, a chance to make someone's life a little better. But she didn't know the truth, because that old man wasn't just any customer. His name was Henry Dalton, one of the most powerful and wealthy men in the city. A billionaire who had vanished from the public eye after losing his wife 2 years ago. For months, he'd been wandering incognito, searching for something money couldn't buy, genuine kindness. And on that rainy afternoon, he found it, in the heart of a struggling waitress who gave freely, expecting nothing in return. Emily returned home that night exhausted, unaware that her small act of generosity had set something extraordinary in motion. She curled up in her small apartment, sipping leftover soup, and whispered to herself, "Someday things will get better." Far across town, Henry stared out the window of his luxury penthouse, holding the memory of her smile in his mind. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope, and decided he needed to find that waitress again. But destiny works in mysterious ways, and their paths were only beginning to cross. The next morning, Emily was back at Marty's Diner. Same smile, same tired hands, same chipped coffee mugs lined on the counter. She didn't know that across town, a luxury black car had just pulled up outside a towering glass building owned by Dalton Enterprises. Inside that car sat the same old man she had served yesterday, now clean-shaven, dressed in a tailored suit, and carrying a quiet determination in his eyes. Henry Dalton had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Businessmen, investors, even distant relatives who spoke sweetly but always with hidden motives. But Emily, she wanted nothing. Her kindness had been pure, uncalculated. For Henry, that coffee wasn't just a drink. It was proof that humanity still had a pulse. As he sat in his office that day, staring at the skyline, he made up his mind. He asked his assistant, Michael, to do something unusual. "Find out everything you can about a young woman named Emily Parker," he said softly. Michael blinked. "A background check, sir?" Henry smiled faintly. "No, just who she is, what she dreams of. I don't want her privacy invaded. I just want to understand her world." Meanwhile, back at the diner, Emily's world was as ordinary as ever, but today, it felt heavier. The rent notice on her fridge had turned red with warning. Her mother's medical bills were piling up. Yet when a customer spilled his soup, she knelt to clean it up before he could apologize. That was Emily. She carried her pain quietly and still found ways to make others feel lighter. "Girl, you ever take a break?" Jenna teased, handing her a plate. Emily laughed softly. "If I stop moving, I might just think about everything I can't fix." That afternoon, as the sun broke through the clouds, a man in a gray suit walked into the diner. He wasn't the old man from yesterday, but he seemed to be looking for someone. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on Emily. "Excuse me," he said, stepping forward. "Are you Miss Emily Parker?" Her brows furrowed. "Yes, that's me. Did I do something wrong?" He smiled. "Not at all. My employer asked me to deliver this." He handed her a white envelope sealed with gold wax. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Dear Emily, you may not remember me, but I'll never forget you. Your kindness warmed more than my coffee. It awakened a part of me I thought was gone. I've made it my mission to pay that warmth forward. Enclosed is a small token of gratitude. With respect, H.D." Emily's hands trembled as she opened the second paper tucked inside, a check. When she saw the amount, her breath caught. $10,000, her coworkers gasped. "Is this real?" Jenna whispered. "Who sends that kind of money for a coffee?" But Emily's first reaction wasn't excitement, it was disbelief. No, this must be a mistake," she said, eyes wide. "I can't accept this. I didn't do anything special." That night, she sat in her apartment staring at the check, torn between gratitude and guilt. Why her? Why would a stranger be so generous? Still, something in the old man's note felt genuine, almost fatherly. After hours of debating, she decided to donate half the money to the local homeless shelter, keeping only enough to pay her rent and her mother's hospital bills. She didn't want to be rich. She just wanted peace. What Emily didn't know was that her decision was being quietly watched. Henry's assistant had followed up, reporting everything back. "Sir," Michael said over the phone, "she donated half the money." No hesitation. Henry closed his eyes and smiled, a rare, heartfelt smile. "Then I was right about her," he murmured. "She's not just kind, she's extraordinary." He leaned back in his chair, thinking of his late wife, whose favorite saying had been, "Kindness is the only wealth worth keeping." That night, Henry made a vow to help Emily, but not with handouts. He would create something lasting, something that would change her life while letting her keep her dignity. Little did Emily know. Her act of kindness had inspired the start of a new story, one that would soon lift her far beyond the walls of Marty's diner. 2 weeks had passed since Emily received the mysterious letter and check. The buzz in the diner hadn't faded. Customers whispered about her secret admirer, and her co-workers half-jokingly called her Miss 10,000. But Emily stayed humble, pretending it was no big deal. In truth, she still couldn't wrap her head around it. Every time she looked at that letter, her heart filled with both gratitude and curiosity. One quiet afternoon, as she refilled sugar jars near the window, a new customer walked in, a well-dressed man in his late 50s with kind blue eyes. He wore an expensive watch but had the calm, unassuming air of someone who didn't need to prove anything. Emily smiled politely. "Welcome to Marty's Diner. Can I get you started with some coffee?" The man nodded, smiling warmly. "Yes, please. Black, no sugar." Something about his presence felt familiar, though Emily couldn't quite place it. As she poured his coffee, he watched her with genuine interest. "You must be Emily," he said casually. She blinked. "Yes, have we met?" He chuckled softly. "Not formally. But I've heard about you. The girl who bought coffee for a stranger when no one else would." Emily blushed a little. "Oh, that. It was nothing, really. Just a cup of coffee." The man leaned slightly forward, his eyes gleaming with quiet emotion. Sometimes it's the smallest acts that carry the greatest meaning. Emily smiled politely but went back to her work, assuming he was just being kind. But when he finished his drink, he stood and said something that froze her in place. "I'd like you to consider a job offer." She looked up, confused. "A job offer? From who?" "From me," he said gently, extending a hand. "Henry Dalton." Her heart skipped a beat. The name hit her like thunder. The Henry Dalton, the missing billionaire. The face she'd seen once in a newspaper beside words like philanthropist and CEO. The kind old man she'd served coffee to that rainy afternoon. Her mouth fell open. "Wait, you're him?" He smiled humbly. "Guilty as charged. But the man you met that day wasn't a billionaire. He was just an old soul who'd lost faith in people. And you—" He paused, his voice softening. "You gave me a reason to believe again." Emily's eyes welled up. "I didn't do anything special." "You did everything special," Henry said firmly. "That's why I'm here. I run a foundation, Dalton Hearts, that supports people who lead with kindness. I'd like you to manage a new project we're launching, a cafe that hires and trains people who've fallen on hard times." Emily stood frozen, words tumbling in her throat. "Me? But I'm just a waitress. I don't have experience running anything like that." Henry smiled gently. "What I saw in you can't be taught in schools. You have empathy, integrity, and grit. I can train you in business, but I can't teach kindness. That's something you already have in abundance." Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped her apron. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it," Henry said kindly. "There's no pressure. I just want you to have a chance to change lives like you changed mine." That night, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her mind swirled with questions and fears. She had always dreamed of doing something meaningful, but she also feared failure. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she let him down? Then she remembered her mother's voice from years ago. "Emily, life doesn't wait for perfect moments. You make them." The next morning, she found herself standing outside Dalton Enterprises, heart pounding, holding a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note she'd prepared. When Henry arrived, she handed it to him. "I thought about it," she said, her voice steady. "And I want to try. Not because it's a big offer, but because I want to help others feel seen, the way you made me feel." Henry's eyes softened with pride. "Then welcome to the team, Miss Parker. This is the start of something beautiful." Emily didn't realize it then, but her life was about to take a turn she'd never imagined. The girl who once couldn't afford her own rent was about to lead a movement that would touch thousands of hearts. 3 months later, the Heart and Hope Cafe stood proudly on the corner of Maple Street. A cozy little shop with wooden walls, soft yellow lights, and a sign that read, "Every cup served with kindness." It wasn't just a cafe, it was a sanctuary. Henry's foundation funded it, but it was Emily who ran it, with a team of workers who'd once been homeless, unemployed or forgotten by society. Every morning, Emily would open the doors with the same hopeful smile she once wore at Marty's Diner. Only now, she wasn't just serving coffee, she was serving second chances. The grand opening had been magical. Local news stations covered the story of the waitress who inspired a billionaire, and customers flooded in to support the cause. Emily's heart swelled with pride every time she saw one of her team members laugh or gain confidence. But success, she soon learned, came with shadows. Managing staff, handling finances, and living up to expectations was harder than she imagined. Mistakes piled up. Suppliers were late, an oven broke down during a rush hour, and critics questioned if the cafe would last without Dalton's wealth. One particularly rough day, Emily sat in the office alone, staring at invoices and numbers that didn't add up. Her hands trembled. "Maybe they were right," she whispered. "Maybe I'm not cut out for this." The door creaked open. It was Henry. He noticed the tears she tried to hide. "What's troubling you, Emily?" She sighed heavily. "Everything feels like it's falling apart. I wanted this cafe to help people, but what if I'm just failing them? What if I let you down?" Henry pulled up a chair beside her. "Do you know what I see when I look at this place?" Emily shook her head. "I see hope," he said softly. "Do you know how rare that is? You've built a space where people walk in with broken hearts and leave believing in themselves again. That's success, Emily, not perfect numbers on paper." She sniffled, wiping her eyes. "But I don't want to disappoint you." Henry smiled gently. "You could never disappoint me. You've already given me something no one else could, a reason to believe in humanity again. Money didn't build this cafe, Emily, you did." His words hit her heart like sunlight breaking through clouds. But before she could respond, a knock came at the door. It was Liam, one of the cafe workers, a quiet young man who'd once lived on the streets. "Miss Emily," he said shyly, holding up an envelope. "A customer left this for you." Inside was a handwritten note that read, "Dear Emily, I came to your cafe after losing everything. Your kindness gave me the courage to start over. Today I got a job interview. Thank you for reminding me that I still matter. Grace." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. She handed the note to Henry, who smiled knowingly. "See," he said softly, "that's your legacy." From that day forward, Emily began to see things differently. Every burned muffin, every spilled cup of coffee, none of it mattered compared to the laughter, warmth, and second chances filling that little cafe. But life still had one more test in store. One evening, as Emily was closing up, Henry collapsed outside the cafe, clutching his chest. Panic spread like wildfire. Employees rushed to call an ambulance while Emily knelt beside him, trembling. "Henry, stay with me!" He opened his eyes weakly, managing a faint smile. Don't worry about me, Emily. Promise me something instead." "Anything," she cried. "Promise you'll keep this cafe alive. No matter what happens. Promise you'll keep spreading kindness." She squeezed his hand tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I promise." The sirens wailed in the distance, lights flashing as Henry was lifted onto a stretcher. He looked at her one last time and whispered, "You've made me proud." As the ambulance disappeared into the night, Emily stood frozen under the glow of the cafe's sign. Her heart was breaking, but her resolve was stronger than ever. The man who had changed her life was now fighting for his own, and she knew she had to honor him the only way she could, by keeping his dream alive. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet hope. For 2 long days, Emily barely left the waiting room, clutching Henry's worn coat in her hands like it was a lifeline. The doctor said he had suffered a mild heart attack, but he was stable now. Still, the sight of him lying motionless under white sheets had shaken her to her core. She had promised him to keep the cafe alive, and that's exactly what she did. Each morning she showed up at Heart and Hope Cafe with a brave smile, even when her heart felt heavy. Her team rallied around her. Liam took over the kitchen, Grace managed orders, and the little cafe became more alive than ever. News spread quickly. Billionaire philanthropist hospitalized. Waitress turned manager keeps his legacy running. Reporters showed up, but Emily never sought attention. She simply said, "This cafe isn't mine or his. It belongs to everyone who believes in kindness." A week later, Henry finally woke up. Emily was by his bedside, exhausted but smiling. "You scared us all," she whispered. Henry's lips curved into a faint smile. "Guess I'm not done yet," he said softly. "Tell me, how's the cafe?" Emily's eyes sparkled. "Thriving." Everyone stepped up. "It's like the place runs on love more than coffee." Henry chuckled weakly. "That's exactly what I hoped for." He reached for her hand, his grip firm despite his frailty. "Emily, I've made arrangements. If anything ever happens to me, Heart and Hope will belong entirely to you." Her eyes widened. "Henry, I can't—" "You already have," he interrupted gently. "You breathed life into it. Promise me you'll never stop believing that small acts matter." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I promise." When Henry was finally discharged, he returned to the cafe one sunny afternoon. The entire staff cheered, customers clapped, and Emily hugged him like a daughter reuniting with her father. For the first time in years, Henry's heart felt truly full, not because of wealth or fame, but because he had found family where he least expected it. Months passed. The cafe expanded to new cities, each one run by people who had once been given up on. Emily became a quiet symbol of hope, a reminder that one small act could change the world. But one morning, she arrived at the cafe to find a letter waiting on the counter, sealed with gold wax. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the initials, HD. She opened it with trembling hands. "My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, it means my journey has reached its end. Don't cry, my dear. Smile, because I left this world knowing that goodness is alive again. You gave me that gift. I've left the Heart and Hope Foundation entirely in your care. Use it to lift others to see the invisible, and to remind the world that compassion is the greatest legacy. Remember, you never just bought a coffee. You bought me back my faith in humanity. With love and pride, Henry Dalton." The paper blurred through her tears. She pressed the letter to her heart and whispered, "Thank you, Henry." That evening, Emily stood outside the cafe, watching the sunset paint the sky gold and orange. She placed a small plaque by the entrance. It read, "Dedicated to Henry Dalton, who proved that kindness can build empires." Customers continued to walk in and out, laughing, sharing stories, and offering warmth to strangers. The aroma of coffee filled the air, and in that moment, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. As she poured a cup for a weary traveler who couldn't find his wallet, she smiled softly and said, "Don't worry about it. This one's on me." And just like that, the circle of kindness began again,